Welcome everyone to Mind Yourself Explorations. And we will be looking at the themes and topics of our Mind Yourself book series. I'm Dr. Mary Murray, series editor of Cork University Press MindYourself book series. The Mind Yourself series is designed to bring safe, researched, peer-reviewed information from frontline professionals and to open up discussions about issues that are important in health and well-being. So while at one level, information about everything is available everywhere on multiple platforms, relying on that information is an increasing problem in a world of misinformation, disinformation, and misdirection. And we just have to ask, what can we believe in? What's true? What can we trust? How can we be safe? The Mind Yourself series was created to address this. And that is because it's delivered by professionals in whom readers can really have absolute confidence. So welcome to this series. For the second segment in the Mind Yourself Exploration series, I'm here with Dr. Seán Ruth, Organisational Psychologist and specialist in the areas of leadership development, conflict resolution, and diversity. And in the last segment and in our discussion, you really laid down the ground in relation to all of those, how unaware we might be of both our privilege, our advantage, our disadvantage, how we're interpreted by others and how we interpret ourselves and others. And you were moving into the area of oppression in I thought, a very beautiful way. So I'd love if we could pick up on that, Seán. And, if I could ask you, what is internalized oppression? How does that come about?
Well, maybe a place to start is to say that most of the damage that gets done by oppression actually happens when it gets internalized. It's something we don't always realize. So we can think about it like this. If you imagine various groups in the society, some of these groups experience prejudice, discrimination, stereotyping, and so on. Now think about what actually happens then to people within those groups. Those prejudices, the stereotypes, the misinformation that people have about these groups, that doesn't stay inside people's heads. It gets acted out in the form of various kinds of mistreatment. Some very obvious types of mistreatment, extreme types of mistreatment, whether it's violence or discrimination or harassment of one kind or another. Some of it is very subtle, so people will find themselves sometimes in a conversation at the end of which they feel bad, but they can't quite tell why they feel so bad, but they know something has happened. Now, this mistreatment is not accidental, it's not random, it's attached to the prejudices and the stereotyping and so on, and to the identity that this person is seen to have. So every time that mistreatment happens, the person is getting a set of negative messages. They're getting this on two levels. They're getting negative messages about themselves personally, and they're getting negative messages about anybody who is like them, who has the same identity. So this happens repeatedly. The person is hearing that they are second class, that they're inferior, that they're stupid, whatever, depending on the group we're talking about. It happens repeatedly, and over time, these negative messages are not just about me personally, but they're about people like me, and over time, they begin to shape my self-image. So if I'm told often enough that I'm inferior, after a while I will begin to think of myself as inferior. But I'll also begin to think of my people as inferior, people who are like me, who share the same identity. So as this process goes on, so I pick up these messages, They shape my self-image. And at the end of the process, I start to act out that self-image. So if I'm told often enough that I'm inferior, after a while I will start to think of myself as inferior, and then I'll start to act inferior. And that's what we mean by internalized oppression. What started as an external prejudice, somebody else's difficulty, has now been internalized. And it only needs occasional reinforcement from outside to keep that internalized oppression alive.
So this really weaves its way into the heart and the thinking and the soul and the self-definition of a person. And listening to you, not just in terms of their own individual identity, but in terms of the group to which I belong is also negatively viewed. And I'm just wondering, how do we, I mean, maybe it's a very simplistic or obvious, but how do we notice this oppression? You know, what are the indications of it? Do we notice it sufficiently, or do we just internalize a sense of I'm no good?
Well, first of all, if everybody around me has internalized the same thing, then the internalized oppression looks normal. But it will show up in various ways. So, for example, it will show up in terms of low self-esteem of one kind or another, depending on the messages that came with the oppression. And the important thing here is this is not just an individual lack of confidence, for example. That if we spend time with a group of people, we'll see a pattern to the way they feel about themselves as a group. So it's a patterned low self-esteem. We'll see the same thing in various people. So that's one thing we'll notice. There's a particular way that people in this group feel bad about themselves. It'll also show up, for example, in a sense of people feeling powerless and feeling hopeless about anything ever changing. So faced with various challenges in their lives, people feel that they are powerless to do anything about these. And on top of the powerlessness comes the hopelessness. So when you go to work with groups sometimes, as they talk about the difficulties they face in their life, you can almost tangibly feel and touch this heavy weight of hopelessness that's on people. Now, some of that is an accurate analysis of the situation facing them, but a lot of it is just purely emotional because of the internalized oppression.
Excuse me, presumably things like anger then one may have different responses to it, one of acute anger as one comes to recognize that they're being unfairly treated or regarded, or a grief, or, what are the different emotions that you've noticed in your work, Seán, arise?
They actually come later, funnily enough.
Do they? Yeah.
As people begin to move out of the internalized oppression, then they confront these feelings. But in the middle of the internalized oppression, it looks normal. It looks appropriate. This is the way life is. This is the way we are. And it'll show up in all kinds of other ways. Like it'll show up, for example, as divisiveness. It'll be difficult for people to support each other. It'll be difficult for people to unite in a common cause to deal with the problems they face. Or there's one particular one that's worth mentioning, is that people develop survival strategies to help them cope with the oppression. But these survival strategies tend to be either they are things that help me personally to survive or help my immediate family, but they actually leave the oppression in place. It's just, I get through it better than the people around me. Or what's often a case with different oppressed groups is that they get the, if you like, I call it an offer. They get the offer of, if you feel bad about yourself, you can seek relief from this oppression by finding somebody else to oppress. So you get a sort of a pecking order. So I feel oppressed at work, and I go home and take it out on my partner at home. and we take it out on the children, and the children take it out on the cat.
Yes.
These things,
the whole domino effect of, and particularly if it's not recognized. I think really what you're focusing on is, and I remember that stage in the book, it's where this is happening to you, but where you are responding, but not recognizing at some level what exactly is happening. So you just feel so bad. And is an element too, Seán, of trying to, sometimes people try to ingratiate themselves, for want of a better word, with the oppressors, to behave like them, to be part of the club, so to speak.
Yeah, you see examples of this in many oppressed groups, where they will try to appease the oppressor in the hope that they will be treated better. It never works that way exactly. And it's understandable, but because of the sense of powerlessness, the idea of actually eliminating the oppression is not on offer. So we can appease, or we can do things to numb how hard it is. We can use drugs or alcohol or whatever. But within the internalized oppression, the idea of getting rid of the oppression is a difficult one to reach. And that's actively encouraged from outside.
Okay. So this really is an important segment, and I remember it as such an important section in your book, that how one comes to understand what is happening to them, which I think we will look at in the next segment, Seán, where we will try and look at those patterns of domination and how one tries to free oneself from them.
Yeah.
Seán, thank you for this. This is just so illuminating. I think it's going to generate so much reflection, discussion, debate, cogitation, all of those words, soul searching in people. So in the next section, we are going to explore the internalized domination. We're delighted that you have joined this Mind Yourself Exploration series. The authors in Cork University Press hope that the Mind Yourself series finds its way to all who need it, and that it gives readers the tools and the resources to really mind themselves. And if you want to explore the books further and this topic further, please go to the website MindYourselfBooks.ie, MindYourselfBooks.ie. Thank you.